I go to a gas station. I'm talking to one guy who I'm helping financially, and I'm just saying, I said, the more you listen to me, the more I'll help you out. And
Yeah.
so I'm engaged in this conversation. And then another gentleman walks up and the first guy leaves and the second guy, we're talking. And I said, are you staying in the park? He says, no, I live in Paso Robles, which is, 100 miles from where I live. He says, I'm just here for the races. I
Give
said,
me a word
oh,
there, Steve.
the most
Oh,
excited.
passionate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the happening place. If we're not talking
Mm.
about in such a great grandeur, then and we're talking about sports in the kind of vigor and excitement in life. Well, where do you think people are going to spend their time on Sunday?
Yeah, yeah. There's a saying in the church that I always just think is hilarious and great. It's the church is true if it wasn't the missionaries would have destroyed it, and that's not. And I love that.
I
Not
totally
because
agree with that.
missionaries are bad. Yeah, but everyone I say that to, they're like, yeah. And it's not because missionaries are bad because they're not. They're awesome. I love missionaries, but they're kids. They're so unprepared for what's facing. I believe that Jesus Christ was real. I believe that He was divine. I think I maybe reconceptualized that differently when I was younger. But by the time I went on mission, that was one thing that would never be taken away from me.
Hey, Mormon. What you
Hey,
doing,
didn't you know your
Mormon?
church is a cult, Mormon?
You're going to hell, Mormon.
Hey, Mormon,
Bible
get out of
tells me
my
you're
face,
going to hell,
Mormon.
Mormon.
Get out of my face, you Mormon.
I have been called a Mormon. I have been called a Christian. I am not a Mormon. I am not a Christian. I am a child of God, and my master is Jesus Christ. I am a Latter day Saint on fire. All right.
Cool. I'm gonna go. Got it. Okay. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you very much there, Steve. I try to do this for those who are maybe in need of some inspiration in their life. And so I'm trying to get as many people on here and join the party as I possibly can. And this is Steve James, everybody. And
Yeah,
you,
nice to
you
meet you,
are a member of
everyone.
the Church of Jesus Christ. Is that right?
I am, yeah. And I'm definitely into, discussing these kind of things online and stuff like that. So, appreciate the chance to come on.
It looks like you're a musician.
No, well, so we have instruments. I can't say that I'm really good at playing them, but we are teaching our kids to know a few basics and to at least be comfortable around instruments, which is
Well,
something
that means you
that's
like
important to
music.
us. Oh, most definitely.
Have you
Most
tried the
definitely.
drums yet? That was the
Yeah.
easiest instrument I could play.
You know, every time I see them, as I've gotten older, the more and more I've wanted to do it. I've played on them a little bit at friends' houses, and yeah, I've enjoyed it. Um, I don't have a space or the money to get them, but that of all instruments, that's one that really appeals to me for sure.
Yeah. So I finally got mine when I was like 48 or something like that. So it took me a while before I could
Yeah,
get mine too. So
yeah,
I enjoy that. Like
well,
I
that's
said, I can't
awesome.
play guitar or piano or anything like that, but it seems I can beat out a sound that people almost enjoy.
Hey, yeah, that's a solid place to be.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny. When I first got my drum sets, I was uh, playing on for a couple of weeks, and some people were next door doing some lawn work and stuff like that, and they came over and said, "Hey, you sound really good." I was like, "How long have you
Oh,
been playing?" So,
nice. That's always nice to
that
get
right,
that.
Steve?
Yeah, that's right. That's
But
right.
anyway, so can you first before we get started with that conversation, I'd love to hear uh, kind of from birth to where you're at right now, kind of overview, and I'd like to know the intricacies of how you uh, either were you born into the church?
Yeah, yeah. So I was born into to families that was members of the church. I'd say that my family's path is kind of a unique one where there's mental illness. There were a few other factors where my family certainly didn't live the stereotypical Latter-day Saint lifestyle, despite living in Utah County. And so throughout my life, I was always definitely culturally Mormon, so they say,
Right.
And in my teen years, there were certainly, I certainly would have classified my faith in a different way than I do now. I think that there was a time where I had lost a testimony of several of the truth claims, or maybe at least didn't understand them well enough to have what I would call a testimony of them today. Kind of started wising up in my later teen years. It was actually a lot of my friends trying to pull me out of the church, get me interested in things, and then asking questions, and that kind of led me to uh, experiences which retained my faith. Ended up waiting a little bit extra time and going on my mission eventually, and coming home from that. And since then, I kind of have always been confronted. I mean, even since childhood, I've been confronted with people who, were critics of the church, critics of, what of us as people as well. And I've always just kind of felt compelled to speak out against that when I know what's wrong. When someone says something that I know is false, I just have this inkling to always speak up against it, even if it's, I could do it in awkwardly at times in inappropriate places sometimes. But when it comes to the church, I've definitely retained that specific characteristic into adulthood. And so, as I'm in my mid 30s now. So I've spent a lot of time, engaging with people, certainly learning a whole lot about, what it is people outside the church think about us, what's factual when it comes to our history, what's in our scriptures, and just a lot of basic things about philosophy, metaphysics, things like that. So I've really gained a lot of knowledge from this endeavor of engaging with people. And it usually starts with them doing something that I know is false, and then I go and learn more, and I'm like, oh, it turns out that was wrong too. So that's been an interesting experience.
Uh,
Um,
I believe I've had those same experiences through this conversation I've had with many of people too. Is not only do I get to learn a different side of the argument, and sometimes they come up with some ideas that actually potentially can be something that I can embrace.
uh-huh.
Or what'll happen is I'll engage in that research. I'll be like, oh, wow, this is they're completely wrong. And
Mhm.
now I have so much more variety of information that I can share that it now I just overwhelm people
Mhm.
with what I've learned. And I got a couple of questions about your history there a little bit.
Yeah.
Now unlike see me, I left the church when I was 17 years old, and then I tried to go back a couple of times. Let me shut this
Oh, sure.
shut my alarms off and stuff like that. Uh, when I came back a few times in that between 17 and 31 or whatever that was. But even whenever I was trying to come back, the in between that, it was like it never worked. But
Mhm.
you never completely fell away from the church. Is that right? You
Oh,
basically had
yeah,
some times that you were struggling, of course,
sure.
but you actually went on a mission. What age what was that age period that you kind of lost your testimony, and then you got
Mhm.
then you it became alive in you, and then you were
Yeah,
able to go on your mission.
sure. Yeah, that's something I ought to sit down and maybe kind of document, just for posterity. But really, it's I would say my early teens, I started living against the commandments, and that got me living my life with certain people who had different values, and along with that came different criticisms. I think in terms of my testimony of the church, I think that for me, there were issues like the priesthood ban that had bothered me to the point where there were certain points in my life where I was convinced that the prophets weren't actually prophets, but they were trying their best. And, it was institutional was the institution was good, but it wasn't true, so to speak. And I think that for maybe, I don't know, mid-teens, I was kind of in that sort of space. I think I was 16 or 17 when I got my patriarchal blessing, and that was something that I felt compelled to do, sort of as a um, a coming of age, I kind of wanted to feel more. I wanted to feel the power behind it, and I wasn't getting that from going to church at the time. Up before then, I had already kind of been on probation and stuff like that, and so I needed something powerful. And as a shock to me, even some of the forces and people who were outside of the church and were kind of opposed to the church supported me doing this. And so, it took some preparation on my end, getting things right. So I was ready for that. And we eventually got there. And it was an experience, generally in a patriarchal blessing. For those who aren't familiar, this is a couple of people in the room tops. And it's a very intimate experience where you receive your spiritual lineage and as well as guidance through your life. This is reminiscent of the Old Testament prophets when they would give blessings to their children that we read about.
Right.
And it's really an amazing tradition. I feel like we in the church ought to do more to embrace it and learn more from it. But for mine, I had most of my family there. It was 10 people in the room, which was kind of uncharacteristic. And even the patriarch himself was, kind of saying that's kind of strange. But the experience became a really powerful one, and it changed me. It changed the people who were in the room, and that to me was really the beginning of like, this isn't just something that your family does. This is real, and that shifted my mind in a very big way. And eventually, by the time I went on a mission, I was definitely had a testimony of things.
How old were you when you went on your mission?
So I was probably close to 20, if not 20.
Okay.
So I was about a year later than most people.
Right. Well, especially at that time when the age was 19.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit different today, of course. And you're saying that after that patriarchal blessing, you were able to really kind of like, stuff is real. This is not a fake kind of religion where people are just doing the best they can. Is that what you're trying to say there?
I would say that up until then, I was still kind of on the fence. But at my lowest point, I kind of felt all religion was just wrong, and that I was kind of more pantheistic in the sense that like God is just kind of everything, and everything is just kind of God, and that I was content with that. By the time I got my patriarchal blessing, like I said, at the time I was kind of more of a traditional kind of cultural Mormon. This was something that I really wanted to get some power from, and that I got power from it. And that's what to me, it became a fruit of the gospel. And I had something tangible, spiritually tangible, that I could latch onto, and I could say, no, this actually gave me strength. This actually did something to me that changed me. And that to me, I think re-engaged my spirit, I guess, got me to a point where I could, come at the gospel in a way like, let me get real, actual spiritual, tangible benefits from this. And once I started doing that, the gospel really became more alive, and my testimony fell into place really pretty quick, because it was like, okay, no one else could have done this, even at my lowest, I believed that Jesus Christ was real, and I believed that he was divine. I think I maybe reconceptualized that differently when I was younger, but by the time I went on mission, that was one thing that would never be taken away from me. And
Wow.
to this day, that's where I'm at.
That's a great story. I mean, and you said you're 30 something.
Yeah, 30, what, 5, 6?
35.
36, yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost amazing that I mean, the rate of missionaries who leave the church is astronomical. After they've gone on their mission, and I think we might retain maybe 45% of those who have went on missions. I think it's down in the 30s myself.
Wow.
I think so it's a very uncharacteristic thing for that a missionary goes on a mission, or somebody goes on a mission and then they return and they stay faithful in the church. And I noticed that there's within your age group that seems to there's a lot of people that are leaving the church in that age group. Even my own children who are almost in your age group have all, except now I've got an 18-year-old that's still as warm with the church as he can be at 18, but all the other ones have left the church. And one of them might still identifies as being still a member, but out of 8 of them, there's 6 of them that are completely out. And so and like I said, they're almost in your age range. So it's kind of like you're a unique kind of human being within your age group to still be a part of it. Is there anything that other than that first moment? I well, actually wanted to go this way first. On your
Mhm.
mission, was where'd you go on your mission, and how was that interaction with people that kind of challenged you?
Sure, sure. So I went on my mission in Oaxaca, Mexico, which is if you're looking at a map of Mexico and it kind of bends down and around, Oaxaca's at the very, very bottom. It's a
Okay,
very
I was in
very
Panama for
okay,
a year
yeah.
and a half, so no mission. I was in the military,
Oh, well,
so
there you go. But yeah, very similar in terms of climate. Although Oaxaca's a little higher up in the mountains, so you do get some cool air there that time. It's a very, very interesting place. A lot of tribes that used to have lots of land kind of got pushed into a space about the size of the state of Utah, maybe.
right.
And these are diverse peoples. Several dozen of them speaking completely different languages, cultures, customs. They're all kind of crammed in there. And so, it was an interesting experience. I absolutely love it there. I've gone back several times. Would go back anytime if I could. So,
Wow.
definitely enjoy that. In terms of the interaction on my mission, so, um, most of the time, people were very, very friendly, very, very kind. We didn't have a whole lot of the Bible bashing kind of thing with like people of other faiths kind of coming and clashing. I certainly had that happen. I tried to generally avoid it, just because it brought contention. We would sit with people and discuss things. There was one guy who was an Adventist, and he had all these very, very rigid proof texts about the Sabbath staying on Saturday, and he was very, very into that. And so my companion and I, we ended up doing this big, long scripture study, deep dive, this big chain, and he ended up recording it. But it was a good hour and a half of us just going verse to verse to verse. Like this is how God can change His law. This is God changing His law. This is God changing this specific law. All of that. And so we had times where it was systematic like that. But for me, a mission isn't about systematic theology. It's not about debating. A mission is about going and finding people whose hearts are ready. And the key indicators, are they reading the Book of Mormon and praying about it? And in my experience, the people who did that tended to progress, and the people who didn't, just didn't progress, even if they had all the other intangibles.
So yeah, on my end, I don't proselyte to people. I love the conversation.
Uh-huh.
That's why we're having this conversation, because I love having conversations about religion or philosophy, or how we get connected. And so that's why we're having this conversation. Is when you're on these on your has your attitude changed in any way compared to how you approach people on your mission compared to how you approach them now?
Yeah, I mean, if I were still a missionary with the name tag and the mantle, I would probably um, do things differently now than I would then, just because I'm older. I mean, I was, still a kid, and there is a certain zeal that comes with being a missionary, and I think that innocent zeal is actually part of the success because it's so authentic. It makes someone vulnerable and allows the Spirit to kind of direct things. Whereas now, I'm too old. I've experienced too much. I would rely on my own wisdom, maybe even too much. Maybe it'd be to a detriment. But if there were things I could change, I think there were specific ways I would say things that would help translate, because a lot of times we often use the same terms, but we kind of mean different things with people. And so there might be certain verbiage I would change in the mission. And I would probably try to be more cognizant about how I teach about family, really reiterate more how important that is, because I don't think I understood how important that is to people until I have my own.
Yeah, and that's that experience about having a family and then translating that to those who are not members of the church is so much easier when you are experiencing that than it is as a 19-year-old trying to explain to them how a father and a mother could embrace their children into a eternal bond. Uh,
Mhm.
Even though that you can do it from a child's perspective, but you don't. I don't even know if you can as somebody so young that you could actually think of that idea. Well, from a child's perspective, this is how it would feel to me. I don't know if you'd ever be able to consciously ever approach it that way while you're on a mission, because yeah, I never went on a mission, of course, but like I said, but I definitely could understand that kind of view, or that kind of how a child would talk about eternal marriage as a 19-year-old compared to somebody who's your age or my age.
No, yeah, absolutely. There's a saying in the church that I always just think is hilarious and great. It's the church is true. If it wasn't, the missionaries would have destroyed it. And that's not. And I love that. Not
I totally
because
agree with
missionaries
that.
are bad. Yeah, but everyone I say that to, they're like, yeah. And it's not because missionaries are bad, because they're not. They're awesome. I love missionaries, but they're kids. They're so unprepared for what's facing them, and yet the church still grows. I look at situations where I'm here in a position where I'm supposed to be like a marriage counselor for these people. I've never been married, don't have any kids, and yet that they're asking me for advice. And so, you really have to depend on the Spirit, and that's why I think the Lord sends missionaries how He does, because there's a humble aspect of it there.
I think, my opinion, the structure of the church is probably the most like perfect. Of course, it is. It's the most perfect structure to bring success in individuals' lives. If you look at how we are structured, it's primary, young men, young women. It's going on a mission at 19 years old, 18 years old. And it's not, and the course is that we are teaching you, and this is what the disconnect is in the young man or young woman's mind, is what is all this stuff going to do for me after I get out of the house or while I'm in college or things like that. Unfortunately, we don't emphasize enough that, hey, we are teaching these things to you so that you can actually go out and teach others. This is not a waste of time. And this is your talent that you can either embrace, that you can actually have these deep conversations with a lot of people. But like I said, I don't think we translate that information well enough to our younglings so that they can understand why we are giving this stuff to them. And I know, and I've spoken this on my own with some others on these YouTube broadcasts. In my own life, I don't ever remember that was ever pointed out. We're not giving you this information just to for your own self. We want you to go out and use it, make it a tool in your life, and teach others. Something, does that seem to ring true in your mind?
Oh, absolutely. Latter-day Saints, they're very, well, we are a very industrious people, and when it comes to expressing ourselves. And yeah, like the gospel, as far as I can remember, like since I was a little kid, it was always like, don't just take what you've learned, but go out and make the world a better place with it. Go out, bless the world with it. And one of my favorite parts of all general conferences is the World Report, or the I guess it's only like the annual, or they do one anyway.
I know exactly what you're talking
yeah,
about.
and I love geeking out over that, because it's cool to see these little projects that often started with a single member or a single ward trying something, and it becomes this huge success. And maybe it's something that applies to the church. Sometimes it's even projects where the beneficiaries aren't people who are in the church or prospective members. These are just people with their own lives that the church is able to help.
Now I didn't get the answer I was looking for, but I'm going to, because you can debate the point or not. Are we doing enough to translate that idea that these things are not just for you as an individual, but it is this is to prepare you to go on a mission? These words that I'm these lessons that we're going through and all these other things, these are to give you tools to use when you go out and talk to people.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe in your ward, maybe you can see it now, but maybe back whenever I was growing up, that might not been translated very well.
And I do think we could do better. I mean, I think that one of the biggest problems the church has is we as members aren't great at sharing it and aren't great at living it. You know, that's probably the worst thing that the church has going for it. But I would certainly agree that young people today don't understand the wisdom that's given in the church and the responsibility to bring that to other people. You know, there was a talk in the most recent general conference where an impression came to me that a lot of the building of Zion, like Zion, might be built 99% by other people outside the church. It just needs that 1% guidance from the church, you know, the membership. And so, you know, the world, these are all children of God, and they're going to benefit from having principles of the restored gospel, and they're going to do amazing things with it. So it is on us to share that more, and that would help the world in general, I think.
Well, yeah, I think, like I said, I'm doing everything I can in my ward. Every testimony meeting I get up and I explain to them the joy and the vigor that you can have of being a part of the work that God has laid out for us. And I just find that and what I'm looking at, there's almost a reluctance to even try to engage in a conversation because people feel like they might offend somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy smokes, are you kidding me? People are hungry. I think in the world, I look at it this way. I see that the religion is a fad, just like sports is a fad. Everything goes in waves. You know what I mean? And that's what we're looking at right now. Now that sports has become kind of an old thing, we can reintroduce religion back into the conversation so much easier now because it has almost no audience for so long that it's that they are out there waiting for somebody to create that conversation. In my life, I have that all the time. I go to a gas station. I'm talking to one guy who I'm helping financially, and I'm just saying, I said, the more you listen to me, the more I'll help you out. And so I'm engaged in this conversation. And then another gentleman walks up and the first guy leaves and the second guy, we're talking. And I said, are you staying in the park? He says, no, I live in Paso Robles, which is, 200 miles from where I live. He says, I'm just here for the races. I said, oh, so he was there listening in on this conversation about God, and he wanted to engage also in the conversation. And this happens to me all the time. I just speak loud enough that people can hear around me. I mean, and that's like I said, I think we're missing a very unique opportunity to start these conversations because people are hungry for something other than sports these days.
Yeah. No, there is something to be said for that. I know a lot of people my age, they're kind of becoming disillusioned with a lot of what they're finding in life. A lot of I grew up in a time when everything was kind of tear religion down for something else, and that something else is usually political or, kind of entertainment based or whatnot, scholarly, academic perhaps. But, a lot of people my age are becoming disillusioned with all that. They're not finding the satisfaction that religion, they got rid of religion to fill this gap, and this new stuff's not doing it. So yeah, I definitely agree that there's an opportunity where people, the priorities are changing, and COVID kind of helped really speed that whole thing up. But people are going to start hitting, their 40s and start questioning, like, what am I doing? And that's, the questions of the soul, I think, are what draws so many people to the gospel. People really get thoughtful about that. And the gospel has answers.
And I had a question for you, if you don't mind answering. What line of work are you in?
Oh, so I just work in blue collar. I do I outfit vans for a local HVAC, electrical, plumbing service
Okay. I'm an electrician too. I'm actually
okay, cool.
maintenance, maintenance electrician kind of, and it was kind of funny. All my life, I've worked in different places, a lot of different places. And, I really wanted to work with those who were, I never worked where there was other Latter-day Saints in the company. They'd
Hmm.
either been no longer in the church or whatever, but I'd never had anybody work. And so the last job I've got at least 3 other people that are members of the church and good faithful members. And my son is trying to follow in my footsteps, who's, wants to go on a mission eventually. So I'm like in hog heaven, So
Yeah, that's great.
and at work, I have developed such a rapport with people. They know exactly what I'm going to talk about. They know that I'm not going to talk about sports. And I have become a person that even my boss, even my supervisor announced to the public, this is my go-to guy. When I'm having problems at home, when I'm having problems at work, I go to AJ because he helps me sort things out in my life. And there's others that do that same thing. And like I said, I'll say it again. When we offer sports in our conversation, and that's the only intent of our life, and we want people to go to church, I'm sorry if you're not talking about church in an excited way, in a most give me a word there, Steve. The most excited,
passionate. Yeah.
yeah, it's like the happening place. If we're not talking about in such a great grandeur, then, and we're talking about sports in the kind of vigor and excitement in life, well, where do you think people are going to spend their time on Sunday?
Yeah. There's certainly truth to that. Absolutely.
And so again, that's trying to get people connected that way. So now you work in the blue collar industry, and do you have opportunities to talk to people at work?
Somewhat. So I don't interface with customers pretty much at all.
Oh, okay.
I do interface with a lot of the techs, the warehouse team, and so I'd say at the place I work, I mean, we've got roughly 100-ish employees that are there. There's a handful of us that are active, believing Latter-day Saints. There's several who are grew up in the culture, or
Right.
we're really into it or that, but and everyone kind of knows who's who on that front.
I just talk to everybody and anybody, so I'm
Yeah.
not shy at all.
No, that's
And
a good trait.
yeah, and you know what? And here's one of the other things of why I can do that is because I just talk philosophy. I say this is, if you want to live a more peaceful or more joyous life, then this is what I do, and this is how you could change. And so many people have said, "Hey, AJ, thanks a lot for helping me out because I was struggling at that time." And like I said, I think it's different in California, I imagine, than it is in Utah, because I think, would you say within your work place that there's a lot of big people that are not members of the church that could potentially be bitter against the church?
Oh yeah. There's definitely people like that. And there's others who are just kind of ambivalent. That there's a lot of people in Utah in general who feel like they've heard all they need to hear, even if they have or haven't. That's just kind of how a lot of people feel, and that's okay. They can grow into the community, and eventually, when their heart's ready to start pondering things, that we'll be right there waiting for them.
I think that's, in California it's a lot different because we have a lot of people coming up from the border, and excuse me, so it's a lot different here. I can understand that. So I can understand. I'm in the greatest place in the world because I get to speak whenever I want. And but the other part of that is that I want to ask. Obviously we're losing a lot of people in the United States. But have we, I mean, we're fourth Nephi all the way. You know what I mean? Great society.
Yeah, sure.
And then, fall off the face of the earth. But do you think there's not enough emphasis on connecting us to the covenants that we're making with God, but yet and because of that, we're not giving that emphasis, that we're kind of saying the church is your connection and not God when it comes to covenants. I mean, and this is where we start to transition into that conversation.
Yeah.
But into that conversation about who's real, the real Christians in the world. So again, when we make covenants, we are covenanting with God, but it seems like a lot of people are looking at the church is, we're making promises to the bishop, or we're making promises to the stake, we're making promises to the prophet. And when they have a problem with the church in general, then they seem to forget that they actually made these promises with God. If you understand what I'm saying there, is there not enough emphasis on that covenant that we're making with God, and we're putting the church in the way of that, in a way?
I could see definitely people have that attitude. They figure, oh, I talked to my bishop, I'm good, kind of thing. It's putting the church almost as a mediator between them and their God within their covenant relationship, which is the wrong way to do it. I mean, it's a covenant you're making with God. The church gives you the platform and the opportunity there, but ultimately that's your promise you're making with Him. Yeah, you might be onto something there that we need to emphasize that more, so that
Yeah.
yeah.
Because we make our covenants with God, and the church is where we are able to act upon those promises.
That makes
That
sense.
should be the emphasis that we make, in my view.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely think that there are people who put too much emphasis on the church and not enough emphasis on the Lord, and that becomes a detriment to them when their testimony hits rocky ground. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think I want to go back just a little bit now, and then we'll engage more into that conversation.
Yeah.
You married? Obviously, you're married, and you got children. Okay.
Yeah. Married, several kids.
All right. Good. Does she? Do you? I told my son, my 18-year-old, are you a hangers on, or are you like on fire with this stuff? He's like, a hangers on. I said, well, you better find you a wife that is on fire with the gospel, or you will not survive. Your wife, one of them on fire kind of ladies? Or?
Oh yeah, no, yeah, she's a returned missionary. Her family's very, very strong in the church. That I would say that if you were to look at our families, just based on not knowing our history, you would probably think that my family was like the outsider convert family, and hers was the more traditional Latter-day Saint family, when in fact it's kind of the opposite. But yeah, she's very, very stalwart, very well versed, very firm testimony, which is really important to me. And that was one of the key reasons I knew it would work with us, because I couldn't handle having a hangers on type, so you say, I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable being in a relationship where I have to kind of carry this person's testimony. I wouldn't feel right about that.
That's such a critical thing, is to have somebody that is supportive and actually out in front. Sometimes I hate being out in front. I'd rather put my wife out in front and say, hey, you take over.
Sure.
And she does a great job in her capacity to help the family, no doubt. But I just one other thing on your mission. Obviously, on your mission, did you have any moment in your life where you're like, I know that your patriarchal blessing kind of set it in stone, but we're talking about bedrock. Was there any time on your mission or after your mission that you finally hit bedrock when it came to your testimony?
I would say that with different principles, it came at different times. So like I say, by the time I went on my mission, I knew Christ was my savior. Like, that much I knew. And that was firm, that was set. In terms of, Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon, a lot of that came along the way. Even priesthood was something that kind of came along the way. I think that my big bedrock experience with priesthood was when I started giving priesthood blessings, something I had never done before. Now I'm in this other language, never done this, and so that was kind of getting thrown into the baptism by fire. And I learned really quickly, that there's a right way to do this and a wrong way. And that the right way is to just let the Spirit direct you, and the wrong way is to just start saying stuff and finding that balance. But when I said something tangible and real there, that developed my testimony there. And then I remember one particular lesson we were teaching the first vision, and that every first lesson it's really quickly hit on some key principles and get right into the restoration. And you shared the first vision, sort of the memorized account that's canonized today. And I remember in this one particular instance I was sharing that, and it was just one of those things where it just really hit me. Like I wasn't speaking, I was now speaking from experience. Like when I say what was happening, I had could firmly feel it, and that's when I could actually say, like, I really do know that this is true. And it was it was a really profound experience to kind of grow into that testimony.
Wow, that's wonderful, because I remember, and you've watched some of my videos, I'm sure. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just a couple.
Yeah, okay. And I emphasize this in one of my with my friend Eric Myers, is the first time I knew Joseph Smith was a prophet of God is because one of my antagonist friends, when I was barely getting my feet wet back into the church, and this was the last time I started getting my feet wet. Now I'm just drenched. He came by, and I was at work, and I'm on one side of the bench. It's an 8x4 bench, and he's about 5 feet away from the bench, and he's starting to talk slanderous against Joseph Smith. And I said to him, with the kind of like, wow, I had to step back from it after it happened, but I said, there is nobody, or neither you or anybody else can say anything about Joseph Smith that would make me deny that he was a prophet of God.
Mm.
And it was like, I'm like, after, and he just walked away. All right.
Yeah.
Didn't even engage anymore. And and I had to step away from that moment. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I'd ever really had that kind of connection between Joseph Smith's prophetic calling and the realization that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, it's like I've had all kinds of experiences that just keep on validating his prophetic calling. And I can understand where that one moment it just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, this stuff is real. Yeah, my patriarchal blessing was one thing that confirmed that I had a Jesus Christ, but now I know Joseph Smith is a prophet of God. Is that did that help? That was that in the middle of your where'd that happen at in your mission? Was that the most to the end?
No, that was very, very early on.
It was very early on.
Yeah, it was like in my first or second area. So this would have been early on in the mission. It was as much of finding comfort with language as it was anything else. But I mean, like I say, at that point, I had believed that Joseph was a prophet. Like I certainly believed it. But up until then, at that moment, it was like ingrained in my soul. It's like I know this as much as I know I'm here, and that's what was so powerful about that, was that I could speak with that knowledge as if I were firsthand, and I could feel comfortable doing that. Which, for someone who's, and you're probably the same way, epistemologically, I try to set qualifiers to things that I think I know, because I know that there's a lot of stuff I think I know and end up not knowing. So I try not to use that word, vaguely all the time. And so to know that I could say I know that with as much knowledge as I know that I exist was a really life-changing thing.
Yeah. Where reason and faith actually just like become one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. So that's a wonderful, like I said, it's a wonderful, and see, I would say, like, and Bob Ailery from our groups and stuff like that, a wonderful testimony. I did his interview too, if you get a chance to watch that.
I'll check that out.
Awesome story. But for me, unless you've had that true conversion, see, one of the things that happens in the church with younglings is that they become comfortable and they just hangers on basically, and they really don't find that fire at all. And even when they go on a mission, there's this, they never find that connection between them and our Father in heaven, Jesus Christ, and Joseph Smith. And for a convert such as me, because I didn't grow up in the church, my mom and dad were pretty much antagonists towards it. Yeah, I got baptized at 9, and I lived within a home eventually where we went to church most often. But it was, but until I was 31, I didn't find my conversion, that real conversion until that moment. But when I did, I was researching the Bible with full intent to find out, for one, was there any value to what I was doing? And was there anything that would take me away from what I felt was true at the time? And I was listening to every born again, every a friend of mine gave me a tape of Walter Martin, who was a big antagonist.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I would listen to that for months. And I also had what's the guy? The 17 Evidences of the True Church. I had that one. I can't remember his name, but I had stuff like that. But so I was engaged a lot in what was going on, anything and everything. And I was looking, I don't know how to explain it, but I was kind of like waiting for something to fall apart in the whole process. Because whenever I came back, I was like, well, it's just probably another failed attempt.
Okay, yeah.
I had a wife at the time. She wanted to go back, and eventually we got divorced, and excuse me, we got a divorce, and she fell completely away after a while, and so the kids and all that. But like I said, in that process, I was actually looking not to really be locked in on anything. I was just kind of in the moment kind of thing, just trying to figure things out. And so what I'm saying is, because I was reading the Bible exclusively and finding all my answers there, as a convert in that way, it gives me and people like me an advantage in a conversation, because I did not grow up traditional, if you can understand that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And do you agree or disagree with that idea that as a Latter-day Saint who grows up in the church, that you have a bigger hill to climb when it comes to convincing of others compared to somebody like me?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get told all the time, oh, it's just because you were raised that way. That's like one of the most common retorts that I hear from people. And oh, had you been born in another place, you would think something different. I hear that so much. And so yeah, having someone who's like, no, I came to this knowledge, like in your life, your 30s, it's like that's a whole different approach. And yeah, it definitely gives us a bigger hill to climb for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so now now that I've heard about everything about your family and or your life and all that.
Where the dear Lord was crucified, who died to save us all. There was no other good enough to pay the price of sin. He only could unlock the gate of heaven.